Hello, lovely listeners, and welcome back to this episode of the Full of Ourselves podcast. And today we are going to be talking about trolls. Trolls. Not those that live underneath the bridge, though I did do, I think it was last summer, I had one of those days of, I just had this idea to be silly. And so I grabbed my jacket and coat and a hairbrush, if I remember, and I went out to the local canal and I stood near a bridge and I did this kind of like reporting about the trolls that live under the bridge and don't feed the trolls, which is what this episode is, don't feed the trolls. And really using where I was that day and feeling kind of mischievous and using humour to take some of that edge off something which, let's be honest, if you are an entrepreneur, if you are creating something, you're offering your services, whatever they might be, you are going to be at the mercy of everybody out there who catches their eyes on what you're doing. And as we all know, everybody has an opinion. Everybody has an opinion.
But what's annoying about that is that they feel the need to tell us about it. I mean, I'm fine with people having an opinion. I don't mind people having an opinion, and that's fine. If I'm not for someone, that's absolutely fine. Just scroll on by. You don't have to stop to tell me why I'm not for you. And I think the reason this first came about for us was like we put our first ever episode of Full of Ourselves out, and within 24 hours we had a troll comment, and I was contacting you about it and kind of, you know, because this is the thing, we know our brain has a negativity bias and those are the things that are going to catch us out. Doesn't matter if we have 99 positive comments, that one negative is going to catch our eye and it's going to catch us out. And in some ways I was kind of like, wow, we're really powerful to call that in already.
Love it.
You know, the fact that we've already kind of got someone who's just very annoyed about women wanting to talk about what they want to talk about. You know, clearly this was not for this person. But anyway, but what was really interesting is when I said it to you and I was like, oh, this has happened. I've deleted the comment because this is... I should make it, because there's one of the things that a manager of mine said, which I always kind of kept up with, and that is don't engage. Because this is what they're trying to feed off of that. I almost feel like they're like, I don't know, it's a Harry Potter reference, but the Dementors, they're feeding off the negative vibes. They want the negativity. And so if we don't give it to them, then that's cut off. There's nothing there. And I'm not saying that if people have feedback, if people have things that they want to say to us, then that's completely welcomed. But this wasn't feedback. This was just personal criticism. And I'm not having that. I'm not holding that on our space. And I was like, nope, this is going. But the thing that was interesting that you said that really took almost the sting out of it for me was you were like, oh, it's probably just a bot. And for some reason, there was something about that. Like the fact that I thought of it as a human person who had made the point of trying to rile me, because the comment was not about anything other than that. That was what it was. But then you said about bots, and what was so interesting is whether it was a real person or whether it's a bot or whatever it might be, is that when it felt like it wasn't a person, when it was just a robot that was responding to like keywords or something, it just took that emotion away from me. And I think that was really interesting, because then it made me think, well, actually, then why am I caring about this guy, this person who I don't know, who doesn't know me? And that really helps. So thank you for that.
No, I don't know. I've got so many things going in my brain right now about this. It's so funny. So you're listening. We're really excited about today's topic. And as any time we've ever had conversations, you know, many conversations pre-beginning the Full of Ourselves podcast, it's so rich and it's so inspiring and it's so juicy. And we're both kind of really, we feed off each other in that way. So I've got a lot going on in my head right now around, we're kind of maybe skipping a little bit ahead, but hey ho, this is a conversation around how do we deal with that? Because for me, I kind of go into the ideal part of me, the balanced, mature part of me, Anna, kind of likes to think I would just put a thank you underneath everybody's, not engaging in the game of, like you say, wanting to kind of feed into that energy. But I really like the idea of I'd just be like, thank you, whatever that is. Kind of almost like stopping them or being a little bit like this isn't going anywhere. In reality, what happens often is I get really riled up. I can feel the part of me that wants to come back with a smart ass, sarcastic, clever response, just totally owning that one. And I have to stop myself from doing that. It is so strong, like literally pull myself away from that edge and just be with. Because often when I'm in that place, actually underneath that is a bit of an ouch, especially if it's something that we care about. There's the ouch of disappointment, there's the ouch of hurt, the ouch of rejection. And I know for me, I'm learning more and more of how can I bear that ouch, because obviously it's really important. But my first reaction is to go into my default defensive, clever, smart ass. Let's hit you with my wit place and be cutting, but with a smile on my face. I'm very good at that. I just have to own it. But what I've also noticed, thank you, and I'm kind of made this way, and this is also just something that could be helpful, is if I let myself then just step back and be with whatever is present, I often find, and this is part of, have we touched upon human design? Maybe not necessarily so much, but part of, I'm a generator, if those of you that are into human design, and I know my big thing is responding. And I know Anna's often been there for me in a coaching capacity when I've had some of the experiences to remind me of this as well, is if I let myself just sit back, be with the energy of what's there, not go into that direct reaction, often what happens is I get this creative response. So, for instance, this was again either last year or the year before, I think, and I'd posted something. It was something to do with women's bodies and orgasms, I think I was writing about. And some guy had written underneath about some comment about, oh, this isn't your blah, blah, vulnerable post or whatever. You're just trying to get, I think it was something like you're just trying to get eyes on, okay, part of me, of course, yes, they're trying to get eyes on stuff. Hello, we're putting ourselves out there. And yes, it was vulnerable post. And it was very about women's experience. So for you to come in, so I had all of my usual reaction. I went for lunch with a friend. It was all fire in there. And then I was actually getting a train over to another city. And I actually wrote a piece that I really love, a spoken word piece called Dear Man Without a Vagina, which I then offered and spoke out. And it felt like, actually, thank you. I took that and I fertilized it and I used it in a creative way. So that could be something, if you're listening and going, oh, okay, there's so many different ways we can handle it, when we get that. And maybe for some of you, maybe it does become a little bit of a seed or a little bit of something that inspires a creative response outwards into the world, so it's not kind of wasted.
Yeah, I've always wondered about this. I love that, firstly, and I love what you do, like your little troll under the bridge sketch, and that that spoken word piece. That is very you, and it's about that responsiveness. And I think for you, the energy of that. I'm not saying we want to be criticized. Don't go there, everyone. But when these things happen, that creative response is very interesting, but also very, very genuine, from you. It's coming from, and I think that's why people connect with it so much, because they're like, oh yes, okay, I can feel the real emotion that's coming from this. And that's that responsiveness and that generative stuff that you do so well. But I think what's interesting about just take that in a little bit. But I think that what's interesting about criticism is, and I wonder what you think about this and whether you'll agree, because I'm not sure if you will agree with this. But I think sometimes when someone criticizes us, the things that get to us the most are the things I don't know. It's not quite. I'm good. I'm just going to say the word that it has like a kernel of truth, or it has something about it that they're trying to just needle at. And so if somebody criticizes you and says you've got purple skin, and you're like, oh, I haven't got purple skin, so you're not going to get upset about that because like you're just like wrong. It's those things that maybe we fear about ourselves.
Give me an example.
Down.
Do you have an example?
Oh, do I have an example?
Feels really good and really. I'm really fascinated to hear this.
Well, I think maybe you would go back to that example of that guy who's basically saying, "Oh, on our first ever episode, and we were talking about why we created Full of Ourselves podcast and why we thought it was important to talk about it, and." And the guy, but basically was like, "Oh, women talking, blah blah blah." Like, oh, it's so boring. You have no relevance. And I guess there's a little bit of me that when we were starting a podcast, going, do I have something relevant to say? Will people be interested in what? Will people listen? And there's a little bit of that. It's that ouch and that hurt, that thing inside that's kind of like, oh, I'm putting this out there. It's that vulnerability, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's kind of like, I'm putting this out there. This isn't for everybody. It's fine if it's not for you. It's absolutely fine. But this is for those people who we already know, because we're already getting the feedback from season 1, who are absolutely loving these episodes, who are waiting for our conversations, who want them to drop more frequently. Yay, thank you for saying that, everybody. But I think in that moment, there was that little bit of that, gosh, is he right? And I knew really wasn't right. But there's that fear and that vulnerability. And I think that's where that comes from.
Yeah, do you know what? It's making me think it's almost like they're putting out those voices in our head, the ones that doubt, the ones that go, you're a fraud. What the hell are you doing? It's almost like they're putting that out there on paper, isn't it? And absolutely, of course, if you're a troll, you're going to go for the most damaging thing. You're going to go for the most like bruisey spot, the most, like you say, the vulnerable part of it. I love that Brené Brown quote that she talks about with this, where she says, unless you're getting your ass kicked out in the ring, I'm not interested in hearing your opinion. And it's true. And this also makes me think about something I've learned about recently, which I'm actually just writing about currently, something called the avoidant artist.
Oh, and I've not heard about this. Tell.
No, this is something I learned in my nervous system training recently. And it's so relevant because it's been me. And maybe, those of you that are listening, you might find there's something in this. And I think actually, like Anna's work is with the good girls, and I really resonate a lot with what she offers. And I think this is something maybe a bit more, touches upon that. So the avoidant artist is created when we were young and we were told we were too much. We shouldn't do that. We shouldn't be like that. All of these places. And without going into a bigger kind of more biological kind of level around this, what happens in our nervous system, because it always wants to keep us safe, that's its job the whole time, it basically decides it's not safe for us to be flamboyant, to be out there, to have that voice, to be mainly too much, I think is such a big one. And so we squish that down, we hide that, we turn the dial down, we just don't be that, and then we grow up and into this, into the people that we are. But it creates this avoidant artist. And then what happens is anytime anybody, and I've so experienced this for many years, anyone who is out there doing what actually secretly I want to be doing, or acting in maybe a full of themselves way, which I wasn't able to access, or being what might be seen as too much, or saying these things, or how dare they, it would set off my own avoidant artists, like the alarm bells. It's kind of touching that place in others. So when we recover, or when we're taking the risk, which is what you're all doing, to actually go, no, I'm going to do this. I'm going to put my ideas out there. I'm going to give it a go. I'm going to be vulnerable in believing in I have something to say, offer, it looks like this, and so on, is when we start to do that for ourselves more, that is basically where the trolls a lot of the time come in. And I've been finding it really helpful to go, okay, it's pressing against their own avoidant artist that. And I use the word artist, but it could be the creator of what they want to create. And I find that actually has been quite helpful to think of it that way, as going, okay, in a weird way, this is of service to you, troll, because if you're having such a reaction to this, you might need to look and go, well, what is it about that this person is doing or saying that you want to be doing or saying, but you've not allowed yourself to, or you've had to squish that part a long time ago, that maybe it's time to own for yourself. And the same for us. You know, I still see that with people, or people do stuff where I get that, ooh, my own judgment comes in a lot. And it's like, okay, can I catch that and go, okay, what is it about how this person's behaving or what they're doing that actually I would like to step into that as well? So, you know, it does work both ways.
Yeah, that is so true. And then it means really that that person who is trolling and who is criticizing, as you say, is doing it from almost the same place as you're creating. Because
Yes,
that's
yes,
that's
yeah.
that's what they're not doing. They're it's almost like they're kind of trying to give the reasons why they're not going out there and doing it, and their own self-criticism, I guess. They're just projecting that, really.
And it's really harmful, though. I remember years ago I mean, it's harmful because let's face it, like you say, like we all know, none of us want to be criticised. None of us want to be rejected. None of us want to have that kind of, you know, it's not even feedback when it's like that. It's just
No,
noise.
no.
It's just prodding. It's cruel, actually, a lot of the time. You know, I would much rather, like, if you don't agree, and I've had this with some articles that I've written, it's edgy. I'd rather, like, let's start a conversation. If you really don't agree with this, let's have an intelligent conversation. I would love that. You know, let's discuss this. We don't have to agree, but at least put your points forward as to why you think I'm wrong. That's far more, we're going to get far more out of that, both of the parties in that, than just some random ridiculous comment. But I've, you know, I always kind of think back to Amanda Palmer, who I mentioned quite a lot because I really love her. And years ago, when she got rid of her record company because they wanted her to be in a way in visibility she didn't want to be, and she did a Kickstarter campaign. And at the time, she raised the most amount of money on Kickstarter. It was all basically the people that pledged were the same number of fans that originally bought her records, so it was her fan base. But she got so much trolling from record companies, people going, you're taking away from other creatives, how dare you, who do you think you are? But particularly from, and I know we've spoken about this somewhere before because I vaguely remember, particularly from a really great newspaper in the UK called the Daily Mail, which you wouldn't even want to wrap your fish and chips in. Let's just put it that way. Another British, Anna's sighing heavily as I say that. It's not even a newspaper. It's likes to rile things up in a very harmful way when people read that shit and believe it. Anyway, they wrote a very scathing article about her, and she talked about it quite a lot, of how painful that was, to the point of where she stopped creating for about 6 months, and she actually wondered whether she'd even be able to again. It hurt her so much. Like, hold on, there's a real person here that has feelings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And she did come out of that, but it took her a long time. And she came out of it in her creative response, actually, which is to create a song called Dear Daily Mail, which was very, very in your face, fuck you. And she performed it topless, and, you know, real kind of, she was her basically. But we don't, you know, we're all sensitive creatures, and it's so brave. We're so brave putting ourselves out there. The act of visibility is such a risk. I'm still working with that. I think it's a constant thing.
I think it is. Thank you for sharing that. I think that's so true. And I think it's around that vulnerability. And I think we were talking a little bit before we started around the witch wound as well, which, you know, we happen to be recording this on Friday the 13th. Just so happens that we're recording it on that date, which has become a very supposedly unlucky day. But I understand, I don't know anything much about this, but I mean, I understand that this was actually quite an auspicious day for women, and a kind of a goddess kind of day. I was just reading something about it just now, and as I say, don't know much about it, but I always wonder when something is associated with women and then it's taken away. It's like, no, that's bad luck now. You're like, oh, okay, that's strange. That's funny
Can't
how
have
that's
anything
happened. But yeah, could you just talk a little bit about what does it mean about the witch wound? We're not particularly, I don't know, I believe in manifestation and things like that, but we're not particularly woo-woo podcast. But I think this is kind of interesting. This is kind of interesting. So
yeah, thank you. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was wonderful that you brought that in because it was so connected to what we're talking about. It's like, whoa, God, this is such a big piece, especially because we're all about women in business. And absolutely neither of us are woo-woo new agey. We've both got our feet on the ground. It's very real. So the witch wound essentially is a lot of people that I've worked with over the years. And even last year when I invested in working with a business coach who's very on it with her business, this actually came up in the group. It was all women at the time. She works with men as well, but it came up, but it was quite surprising when you're doing a business container for this to come in. We can't get away from it, is that a long time ago, not even that long ago, and it's still bloody going on, let's be honest, as women, we were persecuted for having our voice being our power, our voice being a lot of the time what we're here to offer and be in service to, our visibility, our medicine, if you want to look at it like that, our gifts that we're bringing. And because of voicing, we could say voicing in a way of living, as maybe healers or kind of using plants or whatever it might be, manifestations, even all of this kind of thing, working with your menstrual blood, all of this stuff. What happened to us? The worst things, we were punished and tortured and killed brutally, drowned and burned. So as women, we do carry, whether you're aware of it or not, it's called, as Anna said, it's called the witch wound. And it's basically a wounding at the throat where there's a fear, an inbuilt fear of voicing our truth, of having our voice, So it makes it even more of a shout out of kudos for any of us that are traveling this path. I will never stop saying that for any of you listening, that we get it. It is super courageous path to be walking the path of an entrepreneur. And so it's still, it's still there. We're still working with this witch wound. So when somebody comes at us, and maybe particularly men, though I've had it with women as well, it can press against that without us realizing it. Is in this part of us deep down that goes, oh my God, am I going to be killed now? For expressing my opinion. And that's not to be taken lightly. And just to go back to the Friday 13th thing, that's when women used to gather in together a lot and kind of do their kind of witchy stuff. So yeah, of course, it was taken away and made as something terribly bad, because God forbid women should come together and create amazing things. And, God, shudder at the thought.
Yeah. And I think whether you're like, oh, dismissing that, as you're listening, that's fine, that's up to you. But we've talked about before how, the way that women now can even have a bank account on their own without having a man sign for it. That this is something that's only happened since we've been born. But all of this kind of stuff, it's all very new. And just the way, that schooling happened and all of the stuff that we've gone through. I think that if you are of a similar age to us, you'll know that things have changed, and yet things are not changing fast enough. There's two of those things. Yeah. We're also hearing about it in other countries where, they're so frightened of women speaking or women being seen, and women, they're creating laws about their bodies and their, yeah, I don't know.
I mean, look in the States.
I just see that
Mrs. Wade being like, upturned. Like, what the hell? What are we?
Yeah.
How are we living?
Where are we living? But how frightened are people of women? I'm sorry, but if they've got no fear, then none of then this isn't going to happen. I'm writing that down. They're so frightened. And I think this is something around, I saw this brilliant t-shirt which I need to buy, which is like, go through life with the confidence of a mediocre white man. And I was like, I was like, this is the thing that women are missing right now, because we don't have that mad confidence. I saw someone again on Instagram, someone who'd been going to the gym and had lost quite a woman who'd been going to the gym, lost a lot of weight, been doing lots of strength training. She'd been doing it for 7 years. She was doing her workout. She was there, and a man came up to her. Was like, "Do you think you should add cardio to your routine?" And she's talking to him. Finds out he's been going to the gym for 2 weeks. And he feels like he's got the right to say, and I'm just like, but I think this is where women, in some ways, we need to be able to kind of push forward from that place of vulnerability that we already have, and realize that maybe we are a little bit further back because of the way we've been treated and brought up, and all of these kinds of things, and I acknowledge that, but keep pushing forwards, I guess.
100%. And kind of taking that as a little bit of a basis, and going back to kind of the, people putting their opinions. I mean, we touched about this, and I'd love to hear your thoughts around, because there's people's opinions, and then there's things that actually might be helpful, like feedback or I'd love to kind of know your thoughts about how that.
Okay, so what is the difference between criticism and feedback? I think that's an interesting question to ask. And I love going back to Brene Brown's quote that you said, if you've not been in the ring, if somebody is criticizing you, I think one of my first questions is, do they have what I want? Are they in a place where they have achieved what I want to achieve? Because if I'm getting criticism or feedback from somebody like that, I might take that on board and go, okay, maybe this person has something to teach me. Maybe this person has something that I can learn from. But if they're just, if it's like in the theatre and they're just sitting in the stalls and they're just watching and they have no intention of doing something because they don't have they don't want to do it, they don't have the strength to do it, all they want to do is criticize, then I don't want to hear it. You don't.
You know what's making me think of? It's making me think of Waldorf and Statler from Muppets. The two old men in the thing. I mean, they're hilarious. Me and my sister used to call ourselves that because we were very much like that. So we always had something to say. But that was funny because they were, they were criticizing, but it was done with a lot of humour and a lot of love. And okay, the Muppets, and even though they were like that, they were there for every show of the Muppets. They were in for the whole thing, weren't they? They really secretly
loved the show. Come on. I quite like that though, because then if we think about those people who are criticizing and we take them and make them like a Muppet, they no longer have that power, do they? Because it's like, you're just a Muppet. You're just moaning in the corner, and what you say is just funny. I like that idea.
Well, humor is really important, but not to bypass the ouch. That's really important
No.
It's important to feel that, because there'll be a lot of that, and we have to be able to feel those, what we said, the ouch, the disappointments, all those things. It's really important for us to feel it. But then if we're able to hold that, the feeling of it, to be able to go to humour. I mean, humour literally saves people's lives. Think about the horrors that people have been through. And it's a very magical tool, humour. And if we can get to that place of humour with these things, God, it's very liberating. Yeah, completely.
I think that's true. And I think really, as I'm not a writer specifically, but you're a writer. And I think, and my brother-in-law actually is a comedy writer. I think what's interesting is being able to take something serious, it doesn't always have to be serious, but in this case, in terms of criticism, and kind of create something with that and make it funny. And it takes that sting away from it. I heard it was a quote, it's like humor is like a rubber sword, so it's got a point but it's not gonna damage someone, kind of thing. Do you know what I mean? I love that one as well. I don't know who said that. Well, I'm sure we look it up, we can find it out. But I think that's interesting. I think what happens if we come back to Brene Brown's work actually is that what can happen with criticism is that we can get stuck in shame. You can really get stuck in that place of shame, and then we don't want to share, because when we feel shame, we don't want to talk about it. Gosh, I feel so ashamed about this thing. I can't speak about it. And it just gets so stuck in ourselves internally. I think it can even make us ill when we get really caught up in that. And the only way out of that shame is empathy, is sharing it, is talking to somebody who you feel confident talking about it with, who is going to hear what you've got to say, and maybe will say, oh gosh, me too, or oh gosh, something similar to that has happened to me. And suddenly there's that balm of that, isn't there? Of like, oh,
The
I'm not alone.
empathy, 100%. And it's interesting because often when I've been in, maybe groups or retreats or working specifically with shame, and people are revealing, myself included, the things that literally are making us quake. I've had the experience a few times where each time something's revealed, exactly as you said, the feeling of empathy, you can feel it increasing in the room till it gets to the point almost where you don't really remember the words that people shared. It's just you're left with this feeling of connection.
Yeah.
I work more and more these days. I mean, I always have anyway. I've always been interested in kind of shadow work and the kind of edges and things. But more and more these days, I'm working with the modality of kink, which, you might hear that and go, it's sexual, what you're talking about. Yes, there's that element to it, but it's not all. Like with any of this stuff, like the erotic that I work with a lot, the sexual part's tiny, so let's just put that down for now. It's about these places that are not right. We were talking about wrongness before, isn't it? Like, the trolls make us feel that we're wrong. The wrong is when we shame ourselves and then we cut off and shut down and make ourselves smaller, and the impact that has, like you said so correctly, on every aspect of our health. So what I'm more interested these days, and it is very playful, is how do we unshame ourselves by using these places and just admitting them in a way where we take back our power. So maybe it is about, actually, I don't know what I'm talking about really. And then rather than be like, well, okay, probably the truth of that is you do know, as you won't be out there putting your stuff, but maybe there is a little bit of truth in that. So how about, rather than shaming ourselves, we really own going, I have no idea what I'm talking about. I have no idea. I am completely winging this. I'm just getting out there. All this stuff's coming out my mouth. You're listening, lapping it up. I've got a fucking clue where it's coming from. You're about to find out any moment. And actually to really open yourself to feel, because suddenly, and I can feel it now, a lot of energy is there. We're not trying to hide it. If we're really honest, we hear about this, people winging it all the time. We're just claiming that there's a part of, it's not the whole part. There's a part that is winging it. And when we claim those places, not only do we unshame and free up all this energy, which I'm feeling, which is our power, our voice, it is amazing how much we, A, feel liberated, we don't care anymore, and B, how much we give permission for others to go, like you said, me too. And that is huge. That is huge. And we can do that with all of these parts of us, of, kink. I call it kinking our horrors or kinking our monsters, and making them some sacred part of us that exists alongside the part that does know. So
yes. I've always loved that when working with you. If I'm like, oh, this has happened, and you'll be like, okay, and it's almost like I don't have to get rid of that part of me that's unsure, that feels like I'm winging it, that's feels a bit worried about being visible, and you're like, okay, there's that part of you that's there, and you're gonna do it.
Exactly. So we spend far too much time trying to sort that bit out or work it out or heal it or fix it. And like you said, go back to the mediocre average white man. He ain't fucking doing that.
Yeah. I was just thinking about that stat around how women won't apply for a job unless they basically can hit every single criteria, whereas a man will apply for that job even if they've not got all of those things, if they've only got a couple of those things, because they're like, I'm sure I could do it. And I'm not suggesting that the man couldn't do it. I'm just saying that maybe we also need to be in that kind of energy of like, well, that's my next step. Yeah, okay, maybe I can't do all of those things right now, but I'm going to put my hat in the ring. And I think that's what I think we've been taught not to do that in the past, not maybe on purpose, but it's just those are the messages that we've had around being quiet. I mean, I was talking to you at the beginning of this about one of the worst things for the good girl particularly, but one of the worst things we can be is wrong. It's kind of like, let's not do anything. Let's just stay quiet and let's stay in our corner and just not put ourselves forwards, because what if I'm wrong? What if this is the wrong thing? What if this is the wrong path? What if I'm doing it wrong? And that fear is holding us back, but also like, we might be wrong, but let's just, that might be the next step on the path anyway. I think we need to take that brave step sometimes.
Yeah. So, and also with, and it might be out already. Oh, yes, it is, because it was in season 1. So if you've not listened to our season 1 episode, first of all, why not? But secondly, there is an episode in season 1 which is all about getting things wrong, making mistakes. So if you've not listened to that, and this is something that you that you're challenged by, then do go ahead and find that episode, Making Mistakes, and have a listen to that. But I want to go back to what you said, because I think I'm loving the tangents we're going off. The difference between the constructive feedback and kind of trolls as well. Like, how do we well, I love what you said, actually. I really want to come back to that piece of actually looking at who is saying that, and if it's somebody we admire or we look up to or is in that field. What will we do then? So I'm curious. So someone said something, maybe it feels like it's their opinion, maybe it feels a bit trolley, or it's feedback and it's from somebody that we actually would like that from. What do you suggest then? Is it engaging in conversation? Is it taking that and sitting with it? Like, what? I'd love to.
Yeah, I think there are a few things, because I think a lot of times feedback it's motivated but from them. If it's motivated because they want to help you and want you to be better, do better, or something like that, I think there's an energy around that. And I also think that person would likely say, I've got a few thoughts, would you be happy for me to share them? They just wouldn't go there and just blurt it all out. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think they might be more likely to do that. I think when we hit, I have a list of things we shouldn't take feedback about. If you want to hear about that.
Yes.
This came from, there's a great episode actually of Glennon Doyle's podcast around this, which I'll probably link in the show notes, because it was really interesting. Where they were talking about taking, I can't remember if we've talked about this before, so I feel like I have, but anyway, we'll repeat it if so. But taking feedback, it's like, they were giving that idea of the American mailbox, the mailbox, you go to the end of the drive and you go and get the mail and you take it out. And they said what you do is you look at that while you're outside, and if it's the junk mail, you just put it straight in the recycling, and you decide what you take into the home.
Oh, I love
I think
that.
This is what she's, I thought that was quite an interesting way of putting it. It's like, look, what we need to try to do is to decide what is valuable for us to take on board and what we want to try and leave outside. And I think that's easier said than done sometimes, but I think this is the beginnings of doing that kind of thing. So one thing they talked about was anything that's about your appearance, we do not take that on board. Anything that's about relationship, I wouldn't want to be married to her, we do not want to take on board. Anything that's about personality, of like, they're a bit much, or all of that kind of stuff, again, nothing. And anything that's gendered, anything that they wouldn't say about a man, we don't take. It's like, whatever they might say about that. So what we want, if there is something there that's valuable to take, then it's none of those things. It's about how, maybe how we're doing something, how we're communicating, the message that we're sharing. There may be a different way of doing something that perhaps they could suggest a better way. But all of that isn't feedback. And I quite like that.
I do as well, but it's startling, isn't it? Because so much is that when you're a woman.
Yeah.
And
Oh
it's
yeah.
very personal. Like, you can do that. It's personal. You know, it's interesting. A few weeks ago, I really had to stop myself. There's a guy that I really like to follow on Instagram. I think he's called Jimmy on Relationships. He does these great little skits when he dresses up like a woman and there's him. And it's just talking about different dating and things to look out. It's brilliant. Really, really brilliant, really helpful and quite funny at times. And he's hot. See, I'm saying on here. Now, there was a part of me that nearly went to kind of say, this is great, and you're, some kind of version of you're hot. And I was like, whoa, girl, what are you doing? This is like the opposite of these kind of comments that someone, and I have had, on my own stuff as well, that I'm just like, fuck off. What's this got to do with anything? And I had to catch myself going to do that. It was a bit like, whoa, there is something here that maybe we're not necessarily. This is going into a slightly different topic, kind of. Maybe that's a bit in our shadow about letting ourselves kind of be lusty and a little bit like that over, men. I know we're being very, very heteronormative in our conversation here and how we're
Yeah.
speaking about this and just really disowning that. But,
Yeah.
it's that part. It's like, oh, I don't do that. I don't catcall. I don't go, oh, you're good looking, aren't you? You're beautiful. Or yeah, it's interesting. So there was that going on. But I think this is the other thing as well around feedback and trolling. And I love that you brought those things in here, is because it's very easy to take things personally. And I think we have to remember that we have a bigger, this is about our business, this is about our craft, this is about, whatever our offering is, our service. It's not necessarily about us. We just happen to be that vehicle for this particular thing. And if we're going to be too thin-skinned about it all, we're probably not in the right, we're not doing the right thing, because there has to be a little bit of a thick skin around it. But to remember this isn't personal is really important, I think, when we start to put ourselves out there in visibility. And like you said, I love that list. When the comments coming about the trolling is personal, then to kind of just ignore it or just go, thank you. And the other thing as well around feedback is, and this is something that I've only, I suppose, learned this over the last few years, is we can ask for the kind of feedback we want. So if you put something out there, that's a way of bringing our power back. Put something out there, whatever it is, and then be very clear and going, I'd love your feedback around X, Y, and Z. Be very specific. And then you're inviting that, but you're inviting it in order, like you say, for it to be constructive, to be helpful, in order for this to grow, to understand your audience more and so on. So that could be something you might want to play with that you haven't done before, because it actually might also make you go, I don't know what kind of feedback I want. That's actually really good, so that can help you in the steering in the direction of where you want to go.
Yes, and I've heard this thing about like see this kind of criticism or feedback as free consulting. If
Ooh,
you were to pay a consultant to
nice.
come in and analyze and evaluate how you do your business or how you communicate or how you're visible and how these things come up, you would have to pay quite a lot for that. And they're just giving it out for free. And I feel in some ways that makes me feel better. It's like, okay, I'll take what's correct, what is actual feedback. The rest of it, I want to just, I want to just try and discard. But if there's something there that's like, okay, that clearly wasn't clear enough, or this isn't getting to the right audience because this person is misunderstanding this or willfully misunderstanding it, but like take it as free consultation. What can you
Love
do?
that.
How can you be clearer? How can you use that? Because I think when it feels personal, and that's the problem with our businesses, is that
Yeah.
we can be wrapped up in our business because it does feel personal. This is our baby. It's
Yeah.
our thing that we've created and we're putting it out into the world. And and that can kind of come up for us. But I think if we can kind of take the sting of that personal out of it, then that can really be like, okay, what can I learn from this? Is there something I can take from this? Is there something I can improve from this? And then I think then the actual action of doing something helps take away that sting of it.
100%. And what comes up for me, and it's something I've been aware of for myself around all of this, it's still ongoing, is around humility. Like, I think that's a good thing to be humbled, and it's a good thing to have occasional slap of like, whoa, you know the humility is where we are actually, and I've been exploring this a bit recently, like we're in devotion to what we're doing. We're in a devotion to our business. We're in a devotion to our craft and our service. And, you know, we don't have to get all godly around this, but there's something about having the energy of that means that we're constantly kind of almost bowing to it, going, what do you need? Not asking our business, what do you need next? You know, how are you doing? Like, what kind of action are you needing for me to take? Where do you need me to kind of step up more? Where do you want me to just step back more? You know, because like you say, this thing that we've created has come through us. It is like our baby. We've birthed this. It literally probably has our blood, sweat, and tears in it, and hours of our life, and the pain of it forming, and all of this kind of stuff. So we can kind of treat what we're offering as something alive, you know, and growing and evolving, and we're in a relationship too. I think we forget this. So actually, having the humility enough to go, okay, this is also alive and breathing, and let's see, you know, how I can, the word that just comes to me is to how do I bow to this as well and keep my feet on the ground. And I think that's a way for us to grow more and to connect with others more as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I heard this thing that made me, I was interested in how you think about this. But this is about seeing people as energy instead of seeing people as people. If we see what people are kind of putting out as energy, how does that change the way we take in these criticisms or this feedback or whatever? And I think that one was quite interesting to me because it did make me think, oh, okay, what energy is this person putting out? Is it their own wounds that they're sharing here? You know, that you were just talking about earlier. I think that's often the case, really. It's something they've been criticized for, and so therefore they're kind of acting out with it. I thought that was interesting. What are your thoughts about the whole energy of that?
I mean, 100%. Was it you that was telling me about the water? Like the kind of hearing that people are made up of 80% water. Oh, I thought it was you. Okay, so somebody said this recently.
I may well have done.
Yes, I wonder if it was you. I'm sure it was. Somebody said this to me last week around looking around at people, or when you're engaging, or you think a bit like, whoa, it's to actually remember. Oh, no, it wasn't. Actually, no, it's another friend, solo friend of mine, actually, was talking about this, and she's doing a shout out to Ali G, not that Ali G, my friend Ali G, because she's getting up in front of a lot of like very big kind of investor people soon for a business thing. And she was talking about someone who said to her, if you look at people and go, you're made of about 80% water, like I am, like the other person is, and to actually see people mainly as that we have this interconnectedness. And I really like that. And actually it feels exactly what you're saying about seeing people as this energy. I think it brings that sense of, it's connection again, that we're not separate, you know? I mean, but I think also with the trolls, though, I think some people are just psychopaths. I'm just going to say it. There are some nutcases out there. They've got nothing better to do than it's not about them being avoidant artists or you know, kind of wounded or whatever. They're just assholes that just want to like just be mean because they can be cowardly mean behind a keyboard. That's another thing to remember as well. It's incredibly cowardly to troll online and to put comments on things when you think about it.
Yeah, it is. And I think, you know, one of the amazing things about the internet and the way the world has become so connected has been that we can be talking, you know, we've never actually met, we could be talking and we know each other very well. I count you as one of my closest friends. And we can do that, and we can connect with people and who are listening now all over the world. But those very few psychopaths in the world are also able to connect and go out and do these kinds of things that they want to do in a way that they never would have been able to in the past. You know, it's a vehicle. It's been a vehicle for connection, but it's also a vehicle for these people too. And what we want to try and do is just kind of just not take that in, because that's what they're trying to do. They want to stop us. They want to make us feel bad and ashamed and guilty and whatever it is to hold us back. And what we need to do, our biggest weapon is to not listen.
I love this. And this could be a good point to start to draw this to a close, I think. But something just occurred to me as well that I might play with this or do something with this. It's made me think about, I wonder how it'd be if we took on, okay, so I'm just going to say that I'm going to play with taking on trolling myself to the nth degree, almost like a stand-up thing. Like if I say to myself every single thing that a troll could possibly want to say about what I do, how I show up, that feels quite exciting in a kind of very bizarre way of like, if I get there first, you know what I mean, if I'm owning it and have fun with that, it's taking away the possible thing. I'm going to do it. I'm going to make a little video, I think.
I like that. That's interesting. And I think that kind of self-deprecating humor can come from that place, I think, of it's like, let me get the kicks in first, almost.
Yeah.
It's like, let me preempt you doing it. I'm going to do it first. So, you know, I've got that going on. And I think for me, a final thought is that around, I think what happens when we fear stepping out and being visible because we're worrying about criticism is because we have this fear of being wrong. And I was looking at this thing about good judgment coming from experience, but experience often comes from bad judgment. And so sometimes we need to allow ourselves the grace to get things wrong. And maybe we're putting ourselves out there for criticism and we don't want to do that. And we pull back and we hide and we, you know, hide those places in ourselves. But actually what we need to do is just keep going and keep putting ourselves out there and keep creating and keep responding and all of that.
And who is it that said, see, I want to say it was you, but maybe it's not, ages ago. Maybe it's somebody more famous than you.
It's me. If it's so good, it must be me.
Something about, have you ever heard of Good Girls Making History or something? Or Good Girls Changing the World?
Yeah,
you know,
that does sound like me.
And also reminds me of Sex and the City when, is it Samantha's guy was doing his show and I think he was getting like criticism and then the gay, I think it was like Samantha that said first come the critics, then the gays, and then everybody else or something like that. And I apologize, you know, I'm not being like, you know, funny with this. I'm just thinking about from that show, the 90s of Sex and the City. This thing about, there is something about if you're getting criticized, you're onto something.
Yes. Oh, yes. Because otherwise you're basically invisible. You know, there's someone who's going to be, who's going to come out of the woodwork. I've seen this thing of like, if you get trolled, then congratulations, because you've got visibility and people are getting annoyed with you. So that's great.
Yeah. Maybe we should embrace, maybe actually what we're trying to say throughout the whole of this is embrace being trolled. Don't be afraid of it. Celebrate it. You know, celebrate it. Celebrate your first troll. And the 100th. Oh, thank you, everybody. This has been, what a great conversation. We'd love to know your thoughts, okay? What resonated, maybe what made you laugh, what made you go, oh, anything we didn't cover around this that maybe you found helpful, or you'd like to even share your experiences of how you've dealt with trolls, because, you know, we're all in this together and we'd love to hear from you. So that would be really, really appreciated. But thank you for your time and attention at this time.
Thank you, everyone. See you on a new episode very soon. Bye.